Hey guys. Throughout the past year and a half, we have sat through these classes together. We've shared intimate details with one another. We've shared things about ourselves that we don't always share with others, personal experiences that are sacred to us. In this class, we've shared the terrible things that have happened in our lives and the most exciting. We shared the experiences that changed us, that moved us, that made us want to become therapists, that shifted our perspective and opened our eyes. We've grown together and formulated friendship and respect in a manner that's not typical for the rest of the population. I'm opening my conversation with you in this way because for me, like many of you, this presentation will be one in which I open up my personal life to you, my personal patterns of growth. I'm going to say things and share an experience I'm not necessarily proud of, and I'm offering this explanation to you so that you can be prepared, and perhaps even so that I can prepare myself. Through various classroom presentation and prompts, through exploration of our cultural identity, I feel that the class has a pretty good understanding of the way that I was raised. We all know I moved around a lot as a child. I lived with various other families. My mother's husband was in the military. These are the experiences which shape the framework of my identity. Though there is another thing about my past that I rarely discuss because it is difficult, because it is personal, because it's confusing, and it's hard for me to understand. But I can't think of a more appropriate topic for today's presentation. Within both the maternal and paternal strands of my biological family, I've described the existing patterns of domestic abuse, violence, and drug addiction. Though I don't often talk about these experiences, I feel strongly that they've helped me to shape the person I am and the therapist that I am today. Previous to this class, and even prior to the cultural identity paper, I had a pretty good understanding of the way that my upbringing influenced my personal value system. There are certain traits that are detrimental to me in a relationship, whether the relationship be with friends or with a significant other. In my personal life, I have a strong need for honesty because of the rampant lies told in my mother's household. I also value equality. This class has discussed the need for equality between races, and while I wholeheartedly agree, my white privilege makes the inequality between genders a more apparent issue. It's no secret to the class that my mother is in a horrifyingly abusive relationship, and many of my peers know that I struggled with this throughout grad school. Though I did not live with my mother for a very long time during the years of my youth, the family patterns of domestic abuse run deep, and I was continually exposed to abusive dynamics and strict gender roles. We're talking women cook, clean, take care of the household and the children, while men are the breadwinners, the one that deserve an education, deserve to define their own lives, deserve power and control, because women are not equipped with the intelligence and strength necessary to manage the man's work. In my mother's household, every day was an exploration of power and control, and it was made known through no uncertain means which of the two sexes held the power and control in the household. The long and short of this is that I've seen and gone through this cultural model of abuse. And yes, I do perceive domestic abuse as a cultural phenomenon. Abuse, like poverty, can be predicted through patterns of behavioral traits that are passed down the family line. Like many other cultural issues, seeds of domestic abuse are inherited. In my own family, I consider these patterns to be the underlying framework for what is a culture of domestic violence, of oppression of a particular type of person, the persecution of women. Due to these life experiences, I do consider myself to be a fiercely independent feminist, a believer in equality. I wasn't always a feminist, and it took almost my entire life to overcome those seeds of oppression. I myself fell into an abusive relationship and did not realize the depths of the manipulation involved until years later when I was able to step back and analyze the situation. For these varied reasons, I always knew it would be difficult, perhaps even impossible, for me to work with women who were victims of abuse. To be brutally honest, the situation repulsed me. I never understood why the victim didn't leave. Why stay in a situation where your life is threatened? I had absolutely no empathy for these women. I wouldn't understand. I absolutely could not see myself working with that population. Well, this is therapy, and unfortunately we don't get to choose our clients. My first practicum experience was at Gadsden County Correctional Facility. It was there that I met a woman I'll refer to as Rue. Rue was in prison because of her boyfriend. He called the cops and had her arrested for possession of drugs he had provided for her. In every session, she hysterically bawled about this man. This man had beaten her, cheated on her, stolen money from her, trashed her car, prostituted her for drugs, was living with a new woman inside of Rue's house, and was responsible for Rue's prison sentence. All of these things, and she still loved him. She still wanted to be with him. She didn't understand why she wasn't good enough for him. Rue stated that she knew he had ruined her life, but she didn't care. She still wanted to be with him. As each of you can imagine, I was endlessly frustrated by her stubbornness and stupidity, my perception of the situation. And though I tried to have empathy for her, I found it difficult to work with her. If I'm absolutely honest with myself, I committed the ultimate therapist faux pas. I pushed my values upon her. I made my goal in our therapeutic sessions to increase her self-confidence, hoping that by building her self-confidence, she would realize that she deserved better. I admit it. I pushed my ideas on the client. I had my own agenda. I justified it by saying that it was in the best interest of the client, that her self-confidence was so low that she couldn't possibly know what she needed. But who was I kidding? At what point do I get to declare what is in the best interest of the client? I'm sure Teresa in my first practicum class remember that I spent quite a bit of time discussing my frustration with this client in supervision. What could I do? How could I change her? I did not at all consider in this experience that my client had to be the one to want change, to enforce change. I made that therapeutic exchange all about my own values. I did not allow this experience to change me at all, to shift my perspective, to try and see things from my client's perspective. And because I did not allow this experience to change me, it's likely that the experience also did not have an impact on my client. I have to honestly say that there's very little that I learned or grew from in that exchange. Fast forward to present day, this semester, this term, this practicum placement. I'm currently at CIS, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation house for adult women. Well, you can only imagine what 99% of the problems at CIS boil down to. Let me just tell you, there's not a single woman at CIS with a drug or alcohol addiction that doesn't also have a man holding her back. The women at CIS have been beaten, degraded, humiliated, prostituted, and tortured by their men. I have one woman on my caseload whose boyfriend burned her entire body with a flesh-eating acid, and she still wants to be with him. Many of the women have come to realize that the men in their life are holding them back, but many do not have the confidence to stand up for themselves. Many don't believe they can manage on their own. So tell me, with all these prejudices I carry with me, what's changed? How can I help these women who've struggled with someone telling them what to do for so long, these women who've lost control of their relationships, their addictions, and their lives? How can I advocate for a woman's right to control while taking the reins from her myself and formulating her goals for her? I can't. Guys, I don't know what happened. Honestly, I wasn't sure how to address this population, so I prayed about it. God, please work inside me. Please grant me the ability to be what these women need to be helpful. The next day, I was discussing my frustration with my supervisor, how I couldn't understand these women, couldn't find empathy in my heart. My supervisor shared something with me that I should have already known. She stated that some people live without love and compassion for the entirety of their lives. They don't know that they deserve better because they've never had better, and they've been told their entire lives that they are worthless. She said that for many of these women, the tiny amount of positive attention is often enough to keep them around, because that tiny amount of attention is all the attention they've ever been gifted with. I can't really explain it, but something inside me changed. Her explanation blew my mind. I should have known that, obviously, but there was something about the way she explained the situation to me that made a light bulb turn on in my head. Everything became more clear. In that moment, something touched my heart and made it more gentle. I changed. I feel empathy. I feel understanding. I feel compassion. In therapy at CIS with these women, I understand. I want to address her goals. I want to allow her to be in control, allow her to form and work towards her own goals. I learned in another way to separate my needs from my client needs, to separate my goals from my client's goals, to practice empathy, to experience humility. I've been brought to my knees this semester, and I've come out a different person. I began to truly see privilege in my life. Yes, I also grew up in a household with prevalent domestic violence, But I was blessed to have strong, independent women to model my life after. I was taught that I deserved better, that as a person I had an inherent right to a life I wanted to lead, that I deserved an education, that I should fight for things that I believe in, that I should never allow someone to tell me that I wasn't good enough. I realized that I was privileged to grow up in multiple households with multiple people cheering for me, believing in me. When I was told I wasn't worthy, I knew not to believe it. That in itself is a privilege. So perhaps it was not just the clients, but an environment that changed me, an environment of women who want to believe they're good enough but are still struggling to accept their worthiness. I've been changed not just in my therapeutic approach, but in my personal life as well. After not really talking to my mother for 2 years, I finally called to say hello. I finally explained how painful it was for me to see her in pain, to apologize for not being supportive, to apologize for my lack of empathy. After forcing a wall around myself for so long, I finally let some of my walls crumble. I did research on domestic abuse, a topic I've been absolutely avoiding while in graduate school. I called the National Domestic Abuse Hotline and spoke to an advocate. I even called and spoke to different shelters to discuss the current opportunities available for women who are trying to leave. I've taken time to delve into my personal rabbit hole, and I've learned more about myself in the process. In my first practicum experience, I had resentment in my heart towards my mother. I had confusion, hurt, and anger, and transference that I thought I would never overcome. In hindsight, and with some self-reflection, I began to realize that perhaps I avoided this population as a method of self-preservation. Because if I take the time to have empathy for my clients, I might understand their decisions. I might begin to have empathy for my own mother, and I might have to understand her decisions. And I couldn't. I wasn't ready. I've learned in a difficult way that therapy is not about me and my belief systems. It's not about my prejudices. Therapy is about listening with ears and understanding with the heart. Therapy is honestly a collaborative journey in which the therapist changes as much as the client, but the therapist must allow the client to make the changes. The therapist is the guide, but the client is the operator, the one that's in control. It's difficult for me in life to forfeit control, admittedly, but I've learned that in my professional life, it is my profession to allow these prejudices to slip away. In my personal life, I can continue to advocate for women's rights. I will continue my feminist approach, which states my boyfriend can do the dishes and I can take out the trash. But in my professional life, I need to meet every client where they are, work on their goals. This semester, my sense of self, values, and willingness to serve others has been altered. It's an ongoing process, but I think that I'm a better person and a better therapist for the experience. I've also really come to love working with the women at CIS. I have compassion I didn't imagine I would have. I become passionate about my work, and I can imagine shifting my therapeutic focus to this population. So my next point of interest is about the future. This experience has changed me, but what can I myself do to promote change? What can we as therapists do to promote change? What societal changes have to occur to make this cultural issue more apparent? Well, as individuals, we can start by sharing our love and compassion with others, to step outside the confines of our individualistic society and begin to consider individual problems as collectivist problems, to stop ignoring the issue and allowing the abuse to be settled in the home, to break the silence as a popular movement against domestic violence suggests. We can offer our time, our patience, our encouragement, and our understanding. Obviously, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to live with the social stigma against women. Too many routine and unnoticeable ways that women are segregated against every day. Our acceptance of lower pay for the same job, same education, the questions in interviews that ask us how we're going to balance our children and our professions, while male counterparts are not asked the same questions. We live in a nation where belittlement of women is so common and so institutionalized that we fail to notice the hundreds of ways that we as women are segregated against every day. So what can we do? We can continue to excel, to show love, to hold others in compassion of our hearts. We can start standing up for ourselves, modeling through our actions that women do deserve better. We can break the silence. We can refuse to accept a lesser role in society. We can stop apologizing when we ask questions, when we're asserting ourselves. We can live our lives like we deserve to be here, and hopefully, through our behavior, show to others that they can do the same. Questions?